The wind moved slow through the canyon grove, carrying the dry rasp of cicadas and the brittle crack of leaves under heavy boots. Somewhere beneath that pile of fallen branches and rotting oak leaves, a young woman lay broken. Her dress was torn, dirt pressed deep into her skin, blood seeping into the earth beneath her. Her lips trembled as she whispered, barely a breath, "I'll never be whole again." The outlaw who had dragged her here stood above her for a moment. Her stepfather, reeking of whiskey and cheap tobacco, spat into the dirt. His shadow fell across her face like a curse. "You're nothing," he growled. "Dead on legs. Your mama left me with scraps and you're the worst piece of it." He knelt, slapped her hard, then shoved another handful of leaves across her chest. To him this was a burial without a grave. His eyes were hollow, bloodshot, cruel. When he turned to leave, his spurs struck stone, echoing like a death bell. "Coyotes will finish what I started," he muttered, climbing into the saddle. The horse carried him away, the sound fading into the canyon walls. Silence pressed down. The girl tried to move. Her fingers twitched, brushing leaves aside, but her arms collapsed under the weight of exhaustion. Insects crawled across her wrist, the heat of late afternoon bearing down. Turning her breath into shallow gasps, she remembered her mother's voice, faint, fading. "Be strong, my girl." But the echo only sharpened her pain. She was not strong. She was shattered. The canyon whispered back to her, a cruel lullaby of dust and death. A hawk circled high above, its shadow gliding over her fragile frame, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered again, more to herself than the sky, "I'll never be whole again." And then silence. Only the restless shuffle of dry leaves as the wind gathered them over her body, like the earth itself wanted to hide her suffering. The West was not a place of mercy. It was a place where the broken were left to rot. But far off, faint and distant, the sound of hooves began to echo across the canyon. The sun dipped lower, spilling red light across the canyon. Shadows stretched long, like fingers trying to pull her down into the dirt. The young woman lay half buried in the leaves, her chest rising in shallow, broken breaths. Every inhale was a fight, every exhale a surrender. Her cracked lips moved, but no sound came. At last, a whisper slipped free, dry as sand. "Help! Please." The grove answered only with silence. Cicadas sang. Flies circled. A beetle crawled across her cheek. She flinched weakly, unable to brush it away. Her stepfather's voice replayed in her skull, jagged and cruel. "Your mama's gone. You're just a debt, a curse. Worth less than the whiskey I drink." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. She tried to push herself up, her hands clawing at the dirt, fingernails cracking as they scraped stone. But her arms buckled, and she collapsed back into the pile of leaves, their brittle edges cutting her skin. The canyon heat pressed down on her like a coffin lid. Her tongue was dry as leather. She swallowed nothing but pain. A crow cawed above. Its wings flapped slow, circling lower. She turned her head, desperate, her voice barely more than breath. "Not yet!" Not yet. She thought of her mother. Soft hands, lullabies by firelight. Those memories felt like lies now, cruel gifts from a past she could never return to. Her body trembled, surrendering to the dust. The world blurred. Her arms slid outward, fingers stretching weakly through the leaves, as if reaching for a hand that wasn't there. Her eyes rolled back, heavy, shutting against the cruel light, and then hoofbeats, faint, distant, a rhythm rolling through the canyon air. Her heart jolted weakly in her chest. She tried to lift her head, tried to whisper, but only a cracked sound escaped her throat. The hoofbeats grew louder, echoing between the stone walls. A shadow crossed the grove. The girl's lips moved again, a final plea before her body gave out. "Please." "See me?" The sound of reins pulling tight cut through the silence. A horse snorted. Someone was near. The rancher had ridden through the canyon with no aim but to check the water line. He was a man of 50 winters, his face carved by sun and sorrow, his beard lined with silver. His horse's hooves stirred dust in steady rhythm, echoing through the stillness. Something stopped him. The grove was too quiet. No quail flushed from the brush. No rabbit darted across his path, only the uneasy hush of nature holding its breath. He reined in the mare. The horse snorted, ears twitching. The rancher scanned the ground. Leaves had been disturbed, not by wind, but by something heavier. Drag marks, faint, half-hidden beneath oak shadows. He swung down from the saddle. His boots sank into the earth, crunching brittle branches. He pushed aside brush with calloused hands, each step slower, heavier. Then he froze. A pale hand. Fingers curled weakly, dirt under the nails, half buried beneath leaves. His breath caught in his throat. He knelt, heart hammering, and with trembling hands pulled the leaves back. Her face emerged, bruised, bloodied, her hair matted with dust. Her chest barely moved. The rancher's hat slid from his head, dropping into the dirt. His lips parted, but no words came. Only silence, as if the sight had stolen his breath. The girl stirred. Her eyes cracked open, glazed with pain. Her lips moved, whispering the words she had clung to since the beating. "I'll never be whole again." The rancher closed his eyes, bowing his head as though struck by the weight of her suffering. For a moment, he collapsed inward, the silence of the grove pressing on him. Then he moved. He slid his arms beneath her fragile body, lifting her as carefully as if she were glass. She whimpered, her voice hoarse with fear. "Don't hurt me." His reply was low, steady, certain. "No one's hurting you now." He rose, cradling her against his chest. The horse shifted nervously, sensing the burden he carried. The rancher mounted with her in his arms, setting her gently across the saddle before him. His eyes hardened, jaw tight, he whispered to her, though she was half conscious. "You're safe now. Girl, safe." With a tug of the reins, he turned toward the horizon, the horse carrying them both out of the grove and into the uncertain night. The cabin sat quiet beneath a darkening sky, lantern light spilling soft through the cracks in its wooden walls. The rancher pushed the door open with his shoulder, carrying the girl inside. Hinges groaned, and the smell of smoke and pine wrapped around them like a blanket. He laid her down gently on the narrow bed, a quilt faded from years of sun. Her body stiffened, every movement sparking terror in her bruised eyes. She tried to push away with weak arms, whispering sharp, broken words. Don't touch me. Please!" The rancher stepped back, hands lifted, voice low as a prayer. "No rope here, no chain. Only fire and food, for a moment's silence. Only the pop of the hearth and the rattle of the wind outside." He turned, poured water from a jug into a tin cup, then set it near her reach. She stared at it, trembling, before dragging her hand forward to drink. Water spilled down her chin, but the relief in her eyes was plain. The rancher sat across the room, his rifle leaning near the door. He watched her carefully, as if she might break apart in front of him. She whispered again, barely audible. "Why? Why would you help me?" He let the question hang in the air, staring into the fire. Finally, he answered, voice rough. "'Cause no one helped my sister when she needed it. And I'll carry that regret till I'm buried." The girl's lips parted, but she said nothing. She only stared at the flames, her body curling tighter beneath the quilt. Outside, coyotes cried into the night, their howls drifting across the prairie. The sound made her flinch, pulling the quilt over her head. The rancher stood, adjusted the lantern, and spoke steady, firm words meant to anchor her fear. "This roof'll hold. That fire won't die. You rest now. You're safe." Her breathing slowed. The quilt shook less. At last, her eyes closed, exhaustion pulling her under. The rancher remained at the table, hands folded, watching over her as the fire burned low. The night pressed heavy on the cabin, but inside, for the first time in a long time, there was a fragile kind of peace. The prairie lay hushed under the weight of midnight. A lone lantern flickered inside the cabin, casting shadows across the rancher's weathered walls. The girl slept uneasy, tossing beneath the quilt, her breath uneven. But outside, another shadow moved. On the ridge above the ranch, a rider sat still on his horse. The outlaw stepfather, whiskey on his breath, hate in his eyes. He chewed tobacco slow, spitting into the dirt as he studied the faint glow of the rancher's light. "She won't stay hid," he muttered, his voice a growl swallowed by the wind. His hand tapped the butt of his revolver, itching. The rancher felt it. He sat at the table, rifle across his lap, eyes never leaving the window. The silence was too sharp, too watchful. He rose, moved to the door, and eased it open. The hinges groaned, the night air bit cold. He scanned the ridge, lantern glow spilling just far enough to catch the outline of a figure. For a heartbeat, their eyes met across the darkness, hunter and protector. The rancher raised the rifle, steady hands. His voice cut through the night. "You best turn back." The outlaw grinned from the saddle, mocking, cruel. "She's mine, always will be." The rancher's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm, steel behind it. "Not while I'm breathing." The outlaw spat, yanked the reins, and the horse turned. He rode off slow, laughter echoing through the canyon, carried by the wind like a promise of violence. The rancher lowered the rifle but didn't relax. He stood there a long time, watching the dust settle where the rider had vanished. Behind him, the girl stirred. Her voice cracked, weak but sharp with fear. "Is he out there?" The rancher turned, stepping inside, closing the door with a heavy thud. He set the rifle back down, met her frightened eyes. He rode on. "But he'll be back," she shivered, pulling the quilt tight around her shoulders. "Then I'll never be safe." The rancher knelt beside the bed, his voice a vow carved from stone. "So long as I draw breath, he'll never lay a hand on you again." Outside, the wind howled, carrying the outlaw's promise into the night. The town of Dry Creek slumbered under a blanket of dusty stars, but whispers traveled faster than the night wind. Inside the dim saloon, voices trembled with tales of the outlaw stepfather, his debts, his cruelty, the terror he left in every home he touched. The rancher sat in the corner, hat tipped low, ears straining. He had ridden through the canyon to the doctor earlier, and word of his discovery had already reached the sheriff. Justice was stirring, slow but inevitable. The sheriff, a man of firm principles and sharp eyes, listened as townsfolk described the outlaw. Each word painted a portrait of brutality, broken bones, ruined lives, stolen hopes. "He's dangerous," one man said, voice tight. "Always drunk, always violent. You don't want to cross him." The sheriff's hand rested on the grip of his revolver. He met the rancher's gaze. "If he comes, he won't come alone," he said. "Keep your fire lit, protect what's yours," the rancher nodded. There was no bravado, only the quiet weight of responsibility. The girl's safety was more than life or death. It was the promise of healing, fragile and trembling like the lantern light in the sheriff's office. Meanwhile, the girl sat hidden behind a door, hands pressed to her mouth, listening. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the faint glow of the oil lamp. She whispered to herself, voice trembling, Maybe someone can help." The sheriff rose, his boots clicking against the wooden floor. He leaned in, voice low but firm. "The law may be slow, but it arrives. Hold tight." Outside, the wind carried a chill through the streets. Horses shifted in their stalls, restless, sensing the coming storm. Dust swirled across the ground, settling in the footprints of men who had seen too much pain but still chose to fight. The rancher returned to the cabin before dawn, rifle across his back, eyes scanning the horizon. He saw the girl, curled beneath the quilt, fragile but breathing. His hand rested on hers briefly. "They're coming. You'll see, help will come." She nodded slightly, a flicker of hope stirring. Somewhere in the canyon, the outlaw's laughter had faded with the shadows. But the rancher knew this was only a pause. The storm was gathering, and soon, night would bring more than whispers. The west was brutal, but even in dust and blood, law and hope could still find a way. Night fell heavy on the ranch, swallowing the horizon in shadows and whispering winds. Lanterns flickered in the cabin windows, casting weak pools of light across the porch. Inside, the girl pressed her back to the wall, trembling, every creak of timber echoing like a gunshot. The rancher moved silently, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the darkened fields. He had sensed it coming. The predator always returned. Tonight, the outlaw would bring more than threats. On the ridge, torches flickered in the wind. 3 men, drunk and armed, rode slowly toward the ranch, laughter spilling into the night like fire. The outlaw stepfather led them, spurs clinking, face twisted in cruel anticipation. "She's mine," he bellowed. "Every scrap of her." The rancher's jaw tightened. He whispered, low and firm, to the girl. "Stay back. Don't make a sound. I'll handle this." The first horse snorted, hooves crunching dry dirt. The second, then the third. Shadows danced and leapt across the wooden fence posts, and the rancher's rifle caught the glint of moonlight. The girl's breath hitched. She clutched the quilt tighter. They're coming," she stammered. He nodded, voice calm but iron-strong. "Let them come." "The night is ours too." The torches grew closer. The outlaw cursed, swinging his arm, lighting dry grass ablaze. Sparks flew, hissing across the ground. Horses whinnied, snorting at the heat. The rancher fired a warning shot. Wood splintered as bullets struck fence posts. The men hesitated, unsure if this fight was worth it. The girl ducked behind the hearth, eyes wide with fear. The firelight reflected in her tears, casting a fragile glow. She whispered a prayer, small and urgent. "Please, let him be safe." The outlaw spat tobacco into the dirt, anger coiling in his veins. "You can't stop me," he yelled. The rancher's voice was steady, like a steel rod through the chaos. "Not tonight. Not ever again." The wind carried the smell of smoke, the sound of horses, and the tension of a confrontation waiting to explode. The night was alive, teetering between despair and courage, and somewhere in the shadows, justice waited for the right moment to strike.